want to correct something. John Lovell's not a rival. All right, he's got to go up a couple pegs before you get to rival status. No, John's a great guy. I'd never say that to his face, but he is a good human being, generally speaking. Well, listen, thank you all for being here, and thank you for everyone that's watching too at home. I just wanted to talk about a couple of things with respect to this issue. I think the first time most people became aware of me was actually a fight about the Second Amendment on the floor of the House of Delegates in Virginia in 2018. And it was right after the Parkland shooting. And right after the Parkland shooting, because I was sitting on the subcommittee that handled all the gun legislation, I got to listen to a bunch of Democrat legislators and a lot of people testifying that were not there to just tell me that they thought I was wrong. They were there to tell me that I was an evil, bad, no good, terrorist, racist, whatever it was, because I didn't want to infringe on Second Amendment rights. And I just got done with it. I was tired of it. It had been weeks of listening to this. And we had all tried to be respectful because we understood that there was victims that were grieving, but we also understood that our rights are not forfeit when somebody else abuses theirs. And so we weren't going to budge on this issue. And so I reminded our Democrat colleagues on why we actually have the Second Amendment. And I tried to emphasize that you guys seem to think this is about sporting. You guys seem to think this is about just gun collecting or hunting. It isn't. It's core, it's fundamental to what it actually means to live in a free society as a free citizen. So that's why we're not budging. And when I gave that speech, and part of the reason why I think it went kind of viral is because 3 of my Democrat colleagues left the floor in tears. Apparently I had said some very hurtful things. And we all know that there's no worse offense than to offend them and their sensibilities. But I didn't particularly care. And the reason why I didn't care was exactly what I mentioned before. First of all, on a basic, fundamental, philosophical level, the idea that any time your rights should be forfeit when somebody else abuses theirs is absurd. Because now what we're saying is, you really don't have rights, you have temporary privileges handed to the government, which can be taken away anytime somebody else screws up. Makes zero sense. And then I also recognize that a lot of my colleagues, the same ones that were telling me how concerned they were about public safety, were the same people that would go from my gun subcommittee over to the Courts of Justice Committee and then openly advocate for violent felons to be let out of jail early. It's like, so let me get this straight. The person that actually did the bad thing with the gun, you want that guy out of jail early. You want to send him back into my community at the same time that you take mine away? And you're going to claim this is about public safety? Garbage. No, it isn't. It's about control. It's about control. And if you want a perfect example of this, go look at what's happening in Europe right now. Go look at what is happening in Europe. I'll give you 2 examples right off the top of my head. One is Spain. Spain is being invaded right now. And you're watching Spanish citizens going, we don't know what to do. The police are overwhelmed. They're coming in, they're robbing, they're pounding on our doors. What do we do? In America, we know the answer to that question. I promise, you get a mob of people that come to rural Tennessee, where I live now, and start acting a fool, they better hope the sheriff gets there first. That's not because we love violence. It's because we take personal responsibility for the safety and protection of the people we love. This is why during all of the various riots that were going on across the country in 2020, I remember Antifa getting out there and saying, you know, this is kind of ridiculous. We're actually burning down our own cities. And we're like, yes, you are. We need to go to the rural areas. Like every one of my constituents was like, oh, please, we've been waiting for this our entire lives. Please come to our area. And I remember that there was a march in our area in Culpeper, Virginia. And you know what happened? They showed up, they marched, and they left. And it was a good thing too, because there was a ton of people in that town that had showed up politely, respecting the First Amendment, but we were armed. We were armed to make sure that the moment some outside agitator got the idea that they were going to try to burn down our town, they were going to have another thing coming. And you know what? That's what I want Americans to think. I don't want them eager for a fight. I want them prepared for it. A lot of what I do these days is talking to young men, because I'll tell you right now, there's a crisis of masculinity going on in this country. We have too many young men that have been told for decades now that they're the problem with everything in society. They've been told to be feminine, they've been told to be weak, they've been emasculated, and thank God they're not buying it, and they're actually looking for guidance. And one of the things I tell those young men all the time is, young men need a violent hobby. Because a good man is not a weak man. A good man is one that is capable of danger, but understands who he's supposed to be dangerous toward. He's supposed to be dangerous toward those things that would threaten his family, threaten his country. He's not supposed to be dangerous toward his family or toward his country. And understanding the very nature of this right and developing a generation to appreciate it for what it is, not just a right, but a responsibility to protect a free state, is absolutely critical. Now, I learned the hard way in the Virginia General Assembly that I was not going to convince my colleagues that were not already convinced of why we needed to protect this right. And the reason why they weren't going to be convinced of it is because they want a very different America than the one I want. But I did recognize something else, is that the more I actually took time to help train other people to not only understand this issue from a political framework, but from a practical framework, the easier it was to convince people of the importance of this. We used to, when I still lived in Virginia, we had a place where we could shoot on our property, and whenever people would come over and they'd never shot a gun before, I'd always ask them, do you want to shoot? We're all going to go out here, we're going to shoot. Would you like to shoot? Well, I don't know, or, my dad taught me how to shoot a shotgun once, or something like that. And I'll never forget, good friend, she's an elementary school teacher. And whatever you're imagining in your mind when you hear nice, sweet elementary school teacher, that's her, right? Just the bubbly, upbeat, but she had only fired like a shotgun once. So we said, well, hey, look, I'll start you off. We'll fire a little Ruger single action 22. You can kind of get used to it. So she starts to shoot that. She said, oh, this is kind of fun. Like, okay, great. Let's shoot the 9mm. Okay, shoot the 9mm. Let's shoot the 1911. She shoots the 1911. And she's looking over at the AR, right? The scary AR, right? And I'm like, you got to shoot the AR. She's like, okay. So get the AR out there, and she gets it up, and I'm teaching her how to stand, and she's out there, and her fiance is standing behind her, and she shoots one round off, and she goes, can I shoot again? I'm like, yeah, semi-automatic. Just keep pulling the trigger, just keep it pointed down range. And bang, 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 bang. She looks back and she goes, ooh. I look over her fiance and I'm like, dude, I think she just got you pregnant. But the thing is, we could have had a long conversation about the nature of the Second Amendment, why it's important. We could have talked about the history of tyranny and how people have actually risen up in order to both prevent it and defeat it once it had taken hold. We could talk about the millions of times American citizens use a firearm in order to prevent themselves from becoming a victim every year in this country. We could have done all of that, and all of it would have been valuable. But there was something about just going to the range and demystifying this tool that they've been taught to fear, taught to think was scary, and to recognize that in the hands of someone that uses it responsible for the right reasons, it's the opposite of all those things. It's empowering. And that's the sort of country I want to live in. I want to live in a country where law-abiding, free citizens feel empowered to be able to protect the things that they love. Themselves, their family, and yes, their country. Now, I want to address one other thing here because I have never seen this before in my life. And that is the demoralization campaign that is going on in this country right now. I can't believe how many people that share our values with respect to the Second Amendment, with respect to all of our rights, that every time I talk about doing something to fight for this right, for something else, the response that I get back is, who cares? It doesn't matter. They're all corrupt. There's no difference. All the politicians are the same. Really? All of them are the same. Ladies and gentlemen, I love Virginia. I will always love Virginia, and I will always be grateful to Virginia, both for its history in this country, but also what it meant for my family and raising my kids there. But I had to leave. I had to leave because I started to look at the legislation that was being passed. I took one look at my den and I said, well, that's a lot of misdemeanors and some potential felonies. And because I know personally all the people that are doing this, I also knew I'd be a target. But the reason why it's that way in Virginia, because it wasn't that way the 10 years I was there, except for one. And they even pulled their legislation at that point. Why? Because 30,000 Virginians showed up in Richmond and said, you're not taking our rights. But then a few years later, they were back with similar legislation and it passed. Why? Well, because we had a bunch of Virginians that had convinced themselves that, what does it matter? It's all rigged. All politicians are the same. I don't blame anyone for being frustrated at the lack of movement on things that we voted for and things that we want. I expect people to be angry about it and to hold elected officials accountable. But you know what I also expect? I expect all of us to understand that we don't get to sit it out. Had generations before us, under far more difficult circumstances, had decided that this wasn't worth fighting for because it's all the same. That's laziness. It is straight up laziness. What it really means is I can't be bothered. And where this really hit home for me, on this issue among others, where this really hit home for me is when my son announced that he was going to join the Army. And it was still when Biden was president. And he didn't just want to join the Army, he wanted to go in the infantry, right? He wanted to start off the way Dad started off. And my wife was looking at me and she was like, well, you know, do you think we should let him? I said, what do you mean let him? If he believes that this is what God has called him to do, then our job is to prepare him, not give him permission. And not only that, sweetheart, but understand something. Part of the reason why he wants to do it is because he believes us. And we raise him to believe that this country is worth fighting for. We never raised him with this mentality that if it's bad, if it's difficult, if you're frustrated, then the response is to just give up, stay at home, don't do anything. It's all the same. If it's all the same, then go be the person that makes sure it doesn't stay that way for future generations. Stand up and be counted and fight. And he believed us. And so that's what he wants to go do, regardless of who wins the next election. Because he's not going to surrender over our military to people that hate it. And I'm not going to surrender over my country to people that hate it. I get asked, why GOA? And it's because after being a legislator, I remember in Virginia, I got to work with a lot of groups, some great groups. Virginia Citizens Defense League in Virginia. If you're a Virginian, I would highly encourage you to go check those guys out. Those are wonderful. But one of the reasons why I love GOA as a national organization is because it was uncompromising on the most important issues. There's a lot of groups that will be happy to show up for the easy bills. They show up for the hard ones because they understand why it was there in the first place. So I'm not asking anyone here to be satisfied with the representation we currently have. But what I am asking is, because we please differentiate between the people that are actually up there doing the hard work, trying to get things done, and the people that are obstructing them. Because there's a difference. We can get more of the good ones, but only if we show up. They would love nothing more than to convince you. If they can't convince you to think the way that they do, when it comes to state control of virtually every aspect of your life, they will be satisfied to convince you that there's nothing you can do about it. And I'm here to tell you there's something that you can, because I've seen it happen before. But it's not a battle you fight once and is over. It's something that you continually fight so you can hand over to future generations so they can fight it as well. And that sounds exhausting, and there will be times when it is. But the question is it worth it? I convinced my son it was. And so now he's wearing the uniform of his country in order to defend it. And now my job is to make sure that he's right. That it will always be worth defending. So that I can sit one day with my grandchildren and talk about the times where it did get exhausting, where it did get frustrating, but it never stopped being worth it. so that one day when hopefully I get to meet the people that came before me, I won't be ashamed to be in their presence, and I can tell them that I handed off to future generations that which they defended. And that's why we're here. Thank you.